Okay, welcome back. So just following on from the last video, I decided to put this little bit of information in a separate video, just because the last one was getting a little bit too long. Okay, so as you've seen already, this texture is pretty complex. There are dozens of different noise textures in there, which means there are dozens of different scales. The way I've built up this node group means that I have one scale that controls basically every single scale node or every single scale value in the entire system just using one slider. Now that's actually a lot easier to say than actually to do. So let's jump into this node again. Let's just tab into it this time, and I'll try and explain exactly what I've done here. So if you're already familiar with creating node groups, you know that in any node group you have a group output, and you can create as many of these as possible. If I just hit N and open this properties panel, you can see we have these inputs and outputs, and you can just click plus to add in extra ones. You can set up default values, minimum and maximum values. You can rename them. There's a few different things you can do with those. So the outputs I decided on are the final diffuse, the roughness one, which is just where I've taken some additional nodes and some information from elsewhere on the graph, just to create a little bit of a variety roughness map that can be used to control basically how shiny this material is. And I've also got a very simple noise texture here, just with a couple of layers of noise, just to give a roughness to this. So if we again look at this with the height, I'm going to plug this into the normal and then just grab a vector bump, plug this in here, and we need this plugged into the height, and you can see that we've got a little bit of variety in height there. Generally, again, I would probably do this with the roughness a little bit higher, so something like that. And obviously I do have this reflectivity adjust where I can take this, just add white specks throughout the material with a little bit of just general reflectivity on the object. So I think that actually worked out pretty well. It works out quite nicely. So let's just figure out how this scale actually works. So this is probably the most complex part of building this entire graph. It's a way of figuring out how to control multiple scales with one slider or multiple sliders. So again, let's just use this cloud base. So what we have here is we have a bunch of multiply nodes and another multiply node, and we'll go back to the start of this in just a moment, but essentially what we have here are three noise textures with different scales. Then we have three multiply nodes, each with an input and particular value. Now these values on the bottom parts, these are the actual original values for each of these scales. So this one was originally 8.7, this one was originally 25.1, and this one was originally 320.5. So all various different scales. And then originally this value in here was 1. So obviously on a multiply node, 1 times 8.7 gives you 8.7. That feeds into this scale. So this noise texture with this multiply node was still 8.7. Finally, I have this individual multiply node here. This has two values. One of these is plugged into the master scale, which in turn is plugged into this value of 1. So 1 times whatever's in here eventually turns into 1, which turns into 8.7, which turns into 8.7 here, and so on and so on. So essentially this master scale is plugged into a multiply node outside each one of these individual boxes. So eventually this master scale controls every single scale in the entire material. So that's basically the long and short of it. In practice, it's a little bit tricky to do because, well, as you can see, you end up having to create, let's see, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 15, 20, 23, 26, 29, 31, 40, yeah, about 40 odd extra nodes, and then all these extra nodes. And again, you can see that we have some base hue saturation ones. So in this case, the multiply nodes, if we follow them back to their source, get plugged into hue, saturation, and values. So you can use this technique to control not just scales, but things like hue, saturation, and value. And I also have a set here that are plugged into a brightness contrast node. And you can see that these values here get fed in to the group inputs. You can see all these group inputs here. And if we tab out, you can see that these are the values in here. So for example, if we look at this grey contrast, this is 0. And here we go, grey contrast. So let's follow this all the way down. You can see we have a value of 0 in here. So we have an original value of 0.1. And we add 0 to that. And that value goes all the way over here. It's quite a journey. And it goes into this brightness. So essentially we have, well, unfortunately we can't look at this. Let's quickly ungroup node. And where is this brightness contrast? Okay, so this is the node we have here, and through the brightness contrast we get a slight difference. Not much of a difference, mind you, but a slight difference. You can see how that works there. So essentially now I had an input to control that contrast, and I'll just undo. And hopefully we should be able to undo. Well, I'll just not save the file. There we go, we'll just shut that down. And I think that's pretty much the final tip that I wanted to show you. Obviously, if anyone has any questions, you can always contact me on Facebook through any of the groups. I'm a member of quite a few different groups on Facebook, quite a few Blender groups. You can see in my shortcuts are pretty much all Blender groups. I also have my own group, the Complete 3D Artist. This is where students of my online training course actually come to check out some of the other students' work and get hints and tips. You can actually see I've shared Blender procedural textures on that group as well, just to try and get some more people on there. If you look down in the description of this video, you'll actually see a link with a code to get a couple of pounds off my online training course if you want to try that. It's closing in on 50 hours long at present. It's pretty highly rated. My students seem to like the course quite a lot. I try to cover as much as possible over 3 different projects. There's a still life project, there is a hard surface modelling project of a guitar, and at the moment I'm just adding the final touches to an ongoing project which is an interior design project. So there's quite a lot there, whether you're new to Blender or whether you've actually been using it for quite a while. And that's pretty much it. I hope anyone watching this video who's not already a member of the procedural texturing group decides to go over there and join up and tries their hand at creating some of these procedural textures.